Hi, I'm Robert Mellamede, PhD. I'm an associate professor at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs in the biology department. And I'm a very strong advocate for the use of medical marijuana for a whole lot of reasons, but all of them, in fact, other than my own personal experiences, are truly science-based. So that today we live in a world where we have a tremendous amount of knowledge about not only body in general and how it works, but how the marijuana-like compounds, endocannabinoids that we all produce, wind up regulating literally everything in our body. So all of our body systems, our digestive system, respiratory system, immune system, reproductive system, nervous system, and anything I forgot, all of those are involved in a balancing act between what essentially amounts to pro-inflammatory biochemistry and anti-inflammatory biochemistry. And those are held in check as they go back and forth. You have an inflammation because you have an infection, you got to pull that back so that you're no longer in that inflamed state. And that's what one of the many things that your endocannabinoid system participates in turning down these inflammatory responses. And there's tremendous amount of significance to that, because 100 years ago, when we lived in a much dirtier environment with less options with respect to certain kinds of medicines, like antibiotics, because they were not available, under those conditions, people were dying at a younger age, and they were dying predominantly from from infectious diseases. Today, what we're dying from are age-related diseases, of which free radicals are believed to be one of the fundamental etiological components. In other words, free radicals are thought to be responsible for aging. So that it turns out that inflammation and free radicals kind of go hand in hand. They're part of the same biochemistry. And the way our bodies turn down that response is by the use of endocannabinoids, these marijuana-like compounds that we produce from essential fatty acids. We all hear how essential fatty acids are important for your health and for protecting your heart. What's not mentioned is that they are converted into endocannabinoids, and we know that endocannabinoids protect your heart and have all sorts of other health benefits. So, you know, we just need such a higher new degree of education, and it's not happening sufficiently, certainly in our schools. I probably teach one of the only courses on endocannabinoids and medical marijuana in the country. And yet we're dealing with something that's so fundamental to all of our lives, to how we work, and to conditions where we have imbalances. We all suffer a common imbalance. We're all getting older. So these age-related illnesses come as a result of the accumulation of these inflammatory conditions, so to speak, until the weakest link in our individual chain breaks, and that becomes an illness that we have to then deal with. And here you have this plant that can be grown very effectively and inexpensively, that has components, some of which are of profound medical value, that don't even get you high, but they're still illegal because of some totally undivine wisdom here. So we have to make some significant changes. We have to be able to use these plant materials in combination, because it's the whole milieu that has an impact. What you want to do with changing towards health is impact not just one little place, but you want to impact the whole system and move the whole body towards health. And the way these cannabinoids work on so many different levels within your biochemistry, within your organized systems, it's how they culminate to help move an individual towards health. You know, the fact that they're involved in your sleeping, your eating, your appetite, you know, your reproductive behavior, everything that's positive is tuned with these things. And it's just insane what's going on. That this is not readily available, that people get arrested for it, people get put in jail, and we have to pay for the special privilege of getting permits so that we can get our medicine. This is just something's fundamentally wrong. Time for a change. When I talk about these age-related illnesses, we're all aging, but we don't all come down with cardiovascular disease. We don't all come down with autoimmune disease. We don't all come down with cognitive dysfunction. We don't all come down with cancer. But the chances are we're going to come down with one of them. All right? And here we have this one drug that's able to help us holistically with our biochemistry to restore balance. You know, cannabinoids kill cancer cells in many cases. People are not aware of that. They think cancer, cannabis, anti-nausea. It's way beyond that.
Really? Can
Oh,
you
yeah.
talk more about that? We have time. Would you please?
There have been a number of cancers that in experimental situations,
Okay.
breast cancer, prostate cancer, pheochromocytoma, lymphoma, leukemia, skin cancer, a whole variety of cancers that in experimental situations, meaning in tissue culture or in animal models, you can in fact show that cannabinoids kill these cancers. And a lot of people are quite excited about the ability of these cannabinoids to kill cancer cells. There are some studies that have shown that cannabis, I think they specifically use THC in that case. It was an earlier study from quite a long time ago, I think in the 70s, where they looked at cancer, in particular rats, I think, and showed that they were able to inhibit cancer, lung cancer specifically. In Madrid, it was a different story, not from the 70s. This was done by Manuel Guzman's group within the past less than 10 years, and what they showed there was that originally that THC, when injected into a brain tumor in mice and rats, a significant number of those animals the tumor would regress and disappear, so that you actually had survival of rats that would otherwise die. And they examined all the surrounding nerve tissue, and that was all fine, because remember, once again, cannabinoids protect nerves. So here you have such an interesting situation. This anti-cancer drug now, THC, is killing tumors and protecting the surrounding tissue. That's totally the opposite of what happens with all other chemotherapeutic approaches. So it was a result of those animal studies that they did a fairly small clinical trial, because after all, you wouldn't want too many dying people to get high, you know. I mean, that wouldn't be good for them. But they did find in this fairly small study that, if I'm remembering correctly, there was some extension of life, and also they were able to show that a particular very important biomolecule called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, was turned down. And there are other studies that have shown that cannabinoids turn down VEGF. And the reason this is interesting is this is one of the therapeutic targets that a lot of pharmaceutical companies are trying to develop drugs for. The reason being that cancers, we all actually are probably making little cancers in us all the time. The reason we don't get tumors and the reason we don't die of cancer is because in the absence of these VEGF and similar compounds, there are about 30 of them now, that in the absence of those compounds, the tumor can't get a blood supply. So it just kind of seals itself off, and the immune system basically, you know, keeps it under control, and nothing happens. But and cannabinoids have been shown to turn down VEGF, and that's what they found in that clinical study, that VEGF seemed to have been turned down as well. So it's quite an amazing spectrum of compounds that are in that plant. And what's so unique and incredible about them is they are touching on this incredible system that pervades all of us and regulates everything from, I like to tell people, cradle to grave, because it's in mother's milk. So it's soothing you from childbirth, it's stimulating the appetite of newborns, it's helping them promote growth. I think cannabis is a miracle drug, because there's nothing else that impacts on so many of our illnesses. So what are the kinds of things that we can do to try and promote health in these areas? On the one hand, everybody should make sure they take in enough essential fatty acids. They're called essential because we can't make them. And certainly I would say one of the best sources for that is that we should be consuming hemp oil. And the reason I say that as opposed to fish oil is because you can get organic hemp oil, so it's not going to be contaminated with things like mercury. And that's going to allow our bodies to make our endocannabinoids. We often hear about the beneficial effects of things like omega-3s and omega-6s. At least some of the attributes of those compounds are the result of them being converted into these endocannabinoids, into these marijuana-like compounds. So at least that way your body can do what your body can do. You're giving it the tools to make the things that you need. But in many cases, that's not sufficient, and we have to supplement beyond what our body can make. And there's only one planet, or there's only one plant on the planet that has the capacity to really mimic the way our body works with these endocannabinoids, and that's marijuana. So marijuana actually directly mimics these particular compounds, and as a result, it has these strong neuroprotective